Hello and welcome to another edition of Community Forum. My name is Joseph Feaster. I am the host of the program, and I'm excited to be back again this year, 2022, and to bring some good guests before you to let you know what they are doing here in Stoughton and in the surrounding communities. And that's no different today. I have a very special guest, a dear friend, a person who has represented us for now, as I clarified, 31 years, and that is State Representative William C. Galvin. So, Representative, welcome to Community Forum once again.
Well, thank you for inviting me on, Joseph. That was very nice of you.
Well, in terms of fine, over the years, we've done this while I served as interim town manager. You and your colleagues were very helpful in legislative matters and getting things for the town of Stoughton. And I want to talk about some of that today, but assuming that there are some new people that are in the community, because, first and foremost, we can talk about the communities that you represent. Not only do you represent parts of Stoughton, you represent Avon and Canton. This is a 6th Suffolk district. Norfolk district. Gee, I'm thinking about my days of being in Boston. I can't help it. Notwithstanding, I've been out here 24 years. I'm still somewhat of a Suffolk guy.
Just still a carpetbagger right here.
Come on now, give me a break. But in any event, tell our viewing audience a little bit about you. I want to talk to the people who may not know who William C. Galvin is. So tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I grew up in Canton. I graduated from Canton High School in 1974 and went off to Framingham State College at the time. And then I went into my family business, which is an insurance agency, where I was there for just about a little over 42 years. As both a co-owner and insurance broker. I have a full insurance broker's license. And I also have a real estate salesman license. I'm a notary public. I also worked at the Bank of Canton as a business specialist, and I did that for 4 years. My public life, I started back in 1979. When I ran for a position of the Board of Library Trustees in the town of Canton. And then I became a member of the Board of Assessors back in 1987. I'm still a member of the Board of Assessors today. And then in 1990, the then Representative John Flood decided to run for governor. So there was an opening in that position. So I ran, and I was fortunate to win. And so I've been serving as a state representative since 1991, served in several positions at the House, all sorts of committees. And most recently, my committee that I am on now is the Rules Committee. I'm chairman of the Rules and the Joint Rules Committee in the State House.
I guess I'll ask, and I think it's an appropriate question since you're, standing for re-election. Why, after 31 years, why are you running for re-election? And I like that answer. And then the other thing is just to give folks a chance to be able to understand exactly what it means to be the chairman of those committees and to have that type of seniority in the House. What does that mean in terms of being able to get things done? I've been in the State House, so I know some of those answers, but I think I'd rather have you tell them what that means since you're the one that's in the legislature.
Well, the one reason I'm running for re-election, I grew up in a family that believed in public service and believed in giving back. My grandfather was a member of the Board of Assessors for over 30 years. And then my father was on the Board of Assessors in Canton for over 30 years. And then he served a term as state representative also. So I grew up my entire career with the focus that you give back to your communities and that you do that way through public service. So, and I think I still have a lot to give. And so I am running for re-election on September 6th, and I ask everybody out there for your vote. And as far as the responsibility of a chairman, and my position is that you gain experience over time. You know the process, you know the people, you know the committee personnel, and so maneuvering things through the committees is a little easier because they know you, they know your reputation. Your reputation is everything. You have to be a man of your word or a woman of your word. That's very, very important. And the responsibility of being a chairperson comes with a lot of responsibility. In my committee, we deal with all sorts of bills that are filed after the official filing deadline, and all sorts of other type of bills do come through the committee. We have to look over those committees and then release them to a committee that would be responsible for having a public hearing of the bill and to let it proceed through the normal process.
So would it be fair to say, since I have some familiarity with what goes on in the legislature, I've been a lobbyist in the past, and so I've had to probably come before you and your committees, and I've testified as well. As I see it, the Rules Committee is a powerful committee because that's the clearinghouse. Nothing gets to the other committees, gets on the floor. It is would it be fair to say that what my assessment of that is accurate, Representative, at the role of the Rules Committee?
Well, in the Rules Committee, we don't have any time deadlines. Like all the other committees have to process the bills by certain dates, and they have deadlines that they have to make a decision and process the bills. Where in the Rules Committee, you're right, it can sit there forever, you know?
Yeah. And again, my understanding, I suspect that you're probably up to somewhere like, at least at one point in time, you should say 35,000 bills that filed a year. I would suspect that that number is up nowadays in terms of how many bills are actually filed, and then how many get out the end and actually get to being passed is a very small number. But again, it's the Rules Committee that acts as the funnel in order to make sure that any bills filed get to the other committees to be considered and deliberated on.
Well, Joe, you're right. There's a lot of bills filed, and there's a lot of bad bills filed. So a big part of our job is to make sure that bad legislation doesn't somehow get through the process. And that's why the whole process is, people say, oh, gee, it takes so long for, the legislation to go through. But every hoop, it's looked at, it's reassessed. And so hopefully by the time it gets voted on and enacted, it's a good product.
So, again, I have folks going through it because one of the things, most people don't even know what goes on up at the state capitol. They hear things, they hear snippets. And unless you're there, you really don't know what that process actually unfold, how that process unfolds. So let's talk about it. I looked at your legislative update, and there is some legislation which you authored, co-sponsored, but got through because of your support and initiative. And they've been on some major issues, COVID, mental health, etc. I'll leave it to you to speak to and elaborate on any of those pieces of legislation which you wish. I have the list here, but again, it could be matters that you brought to the constituencies in the areas that you represent. It could be broader legislation that affects folks across the Commonwealth. So I'll leave it to you, Representative, to speak to the ones that you wish.
We've had a very busy 2-year session. We did a climate reform bill back in 2021, I think in March. It's a roadmap for the year 2050 to get to net zero limit on greenhouse gases. But with any bill, it has to be looked at every single year because things change, and you have to make sure that your original intent is being followed through with the current circumstances. So all bills have to be kind of revisited and laws revisited, especially something like climate control, which is changing daily. So we did that. We did the Voters Act. So now you can mail in voting without, you don't have to have an excuse. You can just request it. We bumped up, the early voting, and you can register later. So we did a lot of changes to the voting to make it easier, more accessible, having secured ballot boxes for people to drop off. So we dealt with that. We dealt with we have a lot. We did Nero's Law, about, police dogs, if they're injured or something, they can, get medical treatment by the people that are responding. And, the mental health bill we did, which is in conference now, which was a major piece of legislation. That is a big part of what's happening, and the pandemic had a lot to do. I mean, people have been struggling. A lot of our youth are struggling. So to get them the proper mental health and behavioral health reforms, I think it was very important. And I know, Joe, you've had a lot dealings in that. And you probably
in fact, I was going to
know the subject matter a lot better than I do.
Yeah, well, in terms of yes, I do consider mental health my ministries. And in fact, we're having a conversation on my late son's 39th birthday. Today would be 39 years old, death by suicide. And so when I learned that the legislature had passed the legislation and that it was in the conference committee, it was very heartwarming to me. And I applaud you and your colleagues for doing that. So I'm hopeful that what emerges from the conference committee will provide the type of support that persons afflicted with mental health will be able to get the types of treatment that they need. So I applaud you and your colleagues on that very much. And I only stop you because that is an area that's very near and dear to me.
Well, I knew that, so.
Yeah. But, as well, I think it'd just be helpful because there's also some specific legislation that I know that you received for your communities. And since I have the list, I know you have a lot of the legislative pieces that you were involved with. I know there was much around education, student nutrition legislation that you did. I know that you got monies for emergency water connection for Avon to run the summer schools. You got money for Avon for the implementation of an e-permitting system, monies for narrow streets in Canton, money for improvements to the Neponset Street for the summer school program and for the expand traffic calming, and then in Stoughton for the STARS program. So one of the tenets for a representative is to bring home some of the bacon for the districts which you represent, and just wanted to point out those examples of areas where you have contributed to the communities which you represent, Avon, Stoughton, and Canton.
Well, as a state representative, you're always looking out for your district, and one of the best ways to do that is to communicate with your local officials. So I work closely with the local officials in each one of my towns to try to know what their needs are and try to advocate for those at the state level. And like some of those items that you mentioned is great, but we've been looking at vehicles to bring and to take care of some of the things that need to be taken care of in the local towns. Like Route 139, and just in a recent bond bill, I got $5 million to help repair that Route 139, which has been a disaster for a long time. And also just recently, within the last couple of years, I got $300 million to straighten out the I-93, I-95 exchange, where the dead man's curve is. It's a lot of accidents, deaths down there. And so now we've been trying to get the administration, the federal government to join and being able for that bond money to be put out there and to correct that, because that is a major place where the tie-ups and traffic in the morning is terrible down there at that dead man's curve at the end of I-93, I-95. Well, not at the end of I-95, actually, where it meets I-93.
Yeah, speaking about transportation, and again, that's, I've taken that, obviously getting on 90, off of 95 onto 93. And yes, if you're, if you don't slow down to that 25 miles per hour, you're likely to be on the, on the
Yeah.
inbound lane, on the other side. So I know exactly what you're speaking of, but I've always been, concerned about 138, because 138 is partially state, partially, Stoughton Road. And I know funds were given, I think, through, I got the piece of legislation, but funds were given to do some straightening of what's going on in Stoughton Center. Um, But I've always been concerned about the look of 138. I mean, you go to other towns, you go to other cities, one of the main entrance ways into the center of a particular town has some beautification. Ours looks like, uh, well, I was going to say Route 1 going up towards where Saugus and stuff is, but is there anything on the off thing? I mean, I raised this issue when I was interim town manager. I pressed this issue when I was town meeting rep. Is there anything from anything that you know of, Representative, that can be done in order to us? I mean, the planting of trees, something to make, more beautification on 138. Any thoughts?
Well, there is a project going now dealing with 138 into Stoughton. But now they're looking at taking land, because when you widen, you have to have land to widen it. So there's businesses and people that are affected by those decisions. So that's why it takes a while. I mean, the design and then the actual work, it takes a while to get it all done after it's approved. And so I know 138 is being looked at, and I mean, the stretch is being looked at from the Stoughton line to the Milton line, and it's different pieces. And hopefully that'll be done within the next few years, and it'll be a lot easier to travel. As far as Stoughton Center goes, I mean, we have gotten beautification grants in the past, but a lot has to be done in the town. I think some of the buildings have to be, the hole that you have in the center, that needs to be developed. Hopefully someday they'll get the State Theater up and running. And then the talk about taking the post office and, and doing other things in the center. It's tough for Stoughton Center because you got the different highways meeting and in the different directions to Stoughton, I mean, to Brockton, to, 139 there. And it's a difficult thing for the town of Stoughton to deal with, but I know the local officials have been looking at it. I did get in a recent bond bill $1 million for the silent gate for the train going through Stoughton. So hopefully that could be helpful with the development.
Well, I know
I mean, they're going to be doing the fire station over too. So, with the building of the new fire station, the old fire station, they have plans to, I think, knock down the front and then redo the actual building into offices and things.
Well, that's definitely is a blessing. That's something we talked about way back when about the fire station, but as well, you were part of the conversation and speaking with the Postal Service about the possibility of relocating so we could utilize the present location of the Stoughton Post Office for some other type of use. But again, that was back in 2012 when we initiated that conversation, and we're still here. But let me just stay on roads and transportation for a moment, because once again, transportation has raised its head as far as public transportation, and then particularly the transit system has raised its head in a very demonstrative way over the past couple of weeks, with the orange line slow down, or the red line slow down, the green line slow down. I guess the only one that's operating fairly well now is the commuter rail, which I've taken to and fro in and out of Stoughton. Any thoughts as to that? Because I know that the legislature or the state has to subsidize the MBTA because their revenue they don't generate enough revenue to be self-sustaining. Any thoughts as to as I believe there are some committees that the legislature have created or hearings that you created. Any thoughts about that, Representative?
Well, we just passed the bill to, I think it was over $400 million to help the T with their problems, but that's just a pot of money to be used when they figure out how they're going to deal with it. And they have a major health problem. Their infrastructure needs a lot of help. So it's a complicated and large problem that can't just be done overnight. But we'll be having a new administration going in, which hopefully is very proactive, and we'll deal with the situation, because public transportation is so important, especially when you talk about our climate and getting cars and the greenhouses and getting it off the road, get those cars off the road. If you have a well-run public transportation system, people will take it. But when, like you said, when you have trains that aren't on time, they're not getting to work on time, they're going to drive, and then you'll have more cars on the road. When I was driving into Boston during the pandemic, I was actually getting into the State House in 25 minutes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now it's
Yeah.
back to normal. Now it's an hour and a half again,
Right.
and that's both ways, and that's all those cars sitting and running, So if we're able to get a lot of those vehicles off the road just because people now take a public transportation, then I think it's a huge problem, and I think we're starting to deal with it right away, and hopefully we're successful.
Let me bring another issue. I don't know, I haven't heard much on this particular one, but I know that you've been staying on top of that, and that's the extending the commuter rail down to either New Bedford, South Coast, Fall River. I'm not sure where the ending point is, but it's down to the South Coast. Haven't heard much on that particular project. I know there was various views expressed by Stoughton as to both the signaling, as far as the whistles, as far as where the stations will be. Any update on that, Representative?
Well, I know that work is still being done, but it's being done at the other end, down where Fall River and New Bedford is, in Middleborough, in that area. They're doing work down there, and it's still being funded. So it is being, it's not going quickly, but it is going still.
And let me just move to another issue, because these are all, I'm just going to touch upon all the issues, and I'm going to end with us talking about the most recent Supreme Court decision relative to guns. I want to end with that particular topic, but I want to move to the subject of education, because read an article the other day which talked about public schools, and this article talked about the fact that the deplorable condition in the bathrooms in there. But I know, being a person who is very much, and still I am involved in the politics in Boston, that talking about the state taking over Boston, and I think recently something has been worked out that may not occur. But on the whole subject of education, from your vantage points to sitting there as a state rep, what do we need to do? I have my views about public education. There was a big debate with regards to whether the charter school legislation or rights should be expanded a couple of years ago. Any thoughts that you have, any views you want to express on the whole education front here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
Well, the thing in Boston about the state takeover, I mean, you didn't touch on that. A lot of it's a public safety issue. The students don't feel safe in the school. They do those gun drills now, and there's no place for them to go when there's a live shooter, and so there's a lot that needs to be done on the public safety level. And and it's not just Boston now. It's going to be all public schools and private schools that are going to have to deal with the public safety issue because of what's happening in today's society. I don't know why mass shootings in public schools is all of a sudden becoming a thing, but it's really become nationwide a big problem. So I mean, public safety is going to be paramount in part of our discussion. As always, I think a well-funded school system is necessary. I think you got to have early childhood education, give the tools to the kids to learn. I mean, we have a lot of bright kids out there, and there are school systems that don't have the tools that other school systems have just because of where they happen to live. So I think we have to make it so that it's more equal that way, and that all the kids get an equal shot at a good education, so they can go on to college and become productive. And it's good for society in a whole. It helps all of us to have bright individuals, you know, going out into the workforce and you know, contributing to the community.
Well, we have about 3 minutes, Representative, and I know we could probably spend more than that on this subject of the Supreme Court's ruling relative to the guns. Any thoughts on that decision by the Supreme Court, its impact on Massachusetts, and then leave yourself some time to let the voters know once again why they should be voting for you on September 6th. So we got about 3 minutes. So I'll leave it to you how you want to use it.
Well, as far as the ruling on the guns, the New York law it's a little different than Massachusetts. The ruling, the way we're looking at it, is the reason why you want to have a gun, you know, for personal use, and they regulate what you can use it for, whether, you know, you're a private investigator, whatever, that you have to have a gun. And in Massachusetts, when we do it, we do a licensing. They have to have education, but they also have to be approved by the local police chief, and he does an extensive background check of the individuals, and then he decides if they're suitable to carry a gun. And there was a case in Massachusetts where a police chief denied an individual because he didn't think he was suitable because of past domestic violence calls that the department had to go to this individual's house. And this individual ended up getting a gun from a friend, and he murdered his 6-year-old child.
Well, Representative, I just want to, because I've been informed by my producer that our time is running out, and I don't want you to leave here because I know that topic could be one we could talk for quite a bit. I want you to be able to speak to your citizens that you as to why, very quickly, because time is almost gone, as to why they should vote for you.
Well, I would appreciate your vote on September 6th, as I am looking forward to continue working hard for the district. I think I've worked very hard over the years. I don't forget where I come from. I don't go up to the State House and get lost. I've worked in the community, I worked in the private sector, I work in municipal government. So I know what's happening locally and what's happening in the private sector, as well as in the public sector. So again, on September 6th, I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Once again, I have a distinguished guest on the show today, a person who I've gotten to know over the past years and who has decided to jump into the political arena, and that is Tamisha Civil. Tamisha is running for the state representative position for the 6th Norfolk District, which includes the towns of Stoughton, Avon, and Canton. So hello, Tamisha.
Good morning, Joseph. Thank you for having me this morning. Thank you for the opportunity. It's wonderful to give people the opportunity to know who I am and what I stand for. As you may know, I'm a mom. We saw each other at the Juneteenth event. I'm a wife. I've been married for 17 years. And I've been living in Stoughton for several years as well. I'm an associate probation officer, but now on a political leave. And I'm an associate probation officer right in Stoughton District Court. I'm a legal advocate for a domestic violence shelter. I'm a commissioner for the Eastern Region Status of Women and Girls. I'm part of the Parent Council Committee right in Stoughton. And I'm a communications subcommittee for the trial court to end racism. I'm a Stoughton and Canton Sustainability Committee member. I'm a board member for the Massachusetts Association in Education of Young Children. And I'm an independent radio host that it's called Voice of Reason Boston. And it's similar to the Stoughton Access Community Forum, where I invite people to come on the show to talk about issues that are happening and how citizens or community members can get access to resources. So that's what I do. That's all about me. I have a master's in criminal justice and leadership from Northeastern University.
Well, LaCharge, I was just getting exhausted just listening to all the things that you are involved in, being a mom, being a wife, all the associations you're involved with, being an associate in probation, both in Stoughton Court. But I guess out of all of that, our connection is you're an alum of Northeastern University. I'm a double
Yes.
Husky. So I
Yes.
appreciate having that association with you as well.
Thank you so much.
Let's get right into it. We don't have a lot of time, so let's talk about, you decided, with all those things that you were involved with, what made you decide to jump into the political arena and to run for this position of state representative against a person who has had 10 terms,
Right.
as the representing that same district? So talk to me, what persuaded you to do that? And as well, you can talk about what would you say your platform or your agenda is?
Sure. Thank you so much. Well, what I could say is that we need change. It's not personal. Running for office should never be personal for anyone. I'm deeply invested in our community. I'm deeply invested in all the communities that I serve. And we need change. I'm running because it's time for a change, because there's a lot of issues that are happening in our world, such as Roe versus Wade just being overturned. The cost of healthcare is rising. Climate change is only getting worse. We need bold action from our state government. I have a record of engaging in the community, such as coordination of food banks in Avon, serving on Canton and Stoughton Sustainability Committee. And I'm a legal advocate for the Domestic Violence Shelter and a commissioner for the Eastern Region Status of Women and Girls. So I have policy ideas that will positively impact our district and state. People in Avon and Canton deserves a representative who will be engaged and community and stand with them on Beacon Hill. So essentially, that is the reason why I'm running, to serve the people in the 6th district.
Well, and I appreciate that. And you listed a number of things you're involved in and clearly where your interests lie. I'm going to talk about some that which are important to me. And I certainly, because if you are successful, will be representing me as well. Right. As well as my great executive producer, Roy Cohen, if you are the state representative that's elected here. I'm very passionate about the areas of mental illness and diversity.
Yes.
And I might as well throw in there what the recent Supreme Court ruling regarding guns, even though I don't try to draw the connection to that as relating to anything to do with mental illness, but media seems to try to make that connection. I do not, because they try to equate guns and violence to mental illness, and that's just not true. But in any event, speak to me about your views and your issues on those 3 topics: mental illness, the Supreme Court's recent passage of the gun law, and diversity. And we will come back to the abortion issue before we close.
Thank you. So mental health, we all know mental health is important to everyone. This past pandemic has affected all our mental health. We've seen how things have happened in our community. People lost jobs. People were able to do what they used to do. I think when it comes to mental health, we need to pay attention to it. We need to provide more resource and access to those, in our insurance. Our insurance that we pay for should have a plethora of resources where people can go in without worrying about the cost of mental health. I can tell you that people have different understanding of what mental health is. I come from a Haitian American, a Haitian background. I'm Haitian American. And I can tell you my parents, when I was being raised by them, you know, they didn't believe what mental health was. They didn't understand what that is. So I think there's an educational piece as far as what is mental health, how you can get the service and have it available in schools, because it is one of the leading factors in our school. When you have young children trying to show, you know, signs of anything that needs to be done. We need to have more resources in counselors in our schools, so that it could be one of the top priorities in our community. And I can tell you this, when you talk about the gun laws being, one of the gun laws being passed, we need to stop saying mental health is an issue why a person is taking a gun, let alone an 18-year-old who needs an AR-14 to come into a school to shoot up an elementary school. It just, there's no words. And I can tell you that we need a more vetting process. We need common sense gun laws. We need to not just say that, oh, someone can take a class, get a certificate and apply for a gun. We need more of a thorough vetting process when it comes to getting access to guns.
Well, let me ask you this again. I'm going to stay on that, and I'm glad that you agree with me with regards to not connecting mental illness to what's happening with the gun violence. I find that to be repulsive, and I speak about it because, you know, that's mental health. I consider my ministry.
Mhm.
But let's drill down a little bit and talk about it. I now want to put you sitting up at the State House as the legislator. And now with the changes, because I haven't gone to interpret entirely what impact the Supreme Court decision will have, but it will have ramifications on what we do here in Massachusetts.
Mhm.
What would be some of your thinking? And I think you may have articulated that, but let's make it clear what you would have in mind if you were sitting there as a legislator. What would you like to see? And I'm not asking you to try to do the full interpretation of the decision, because I'm sure you'd have to read it more thoroughly to see its impact. But what would you propose with regards to that? And similarly, with regards, I know that the legislature just, because I was with the Senate President recently, Senate President Spilker, around mental health, and they've emboldened a lot of the funding, et cetera, for mental health. What are some of the things that you might propose, and what might be your legislative agenda? You're now sitting there as representing us as a state rep. You know, we get very parochial. We want to deal with what's happening for Stoughton. What would be some of the things that you may put in? And you can take any one of those or all of them if you like.
Well, like I stated before, I was an associate probation officer before taking a political leave, and I work right out from Stoughton District Court. So what that means is that any cases that come into the court, it comes across my desk. And I cannot tell you, one of the things that I see a lot is those who have gun charges have a long history of a record. You know, if you have a record, there should be a long vetting process as to if you can get access to getting a gun. There should be more of a thorough look in your background check. There should be, if there's anyone in your household that has mental health illness or has an issue or domestic violence, there should be a thorough background check in the household. And this is where I stand. It has to be through your record. There needs to be red flags if you've been incarcerated, or if, you know, any kind of criminal activity that you've been part of. There should be a long vetting process and red flags and and just looking through someone's background before someone could get access to getting a gun or license to that.
Well, again, I'm just I'm being probative this morning. Maybe this is just how I feel on this particular day. I want to just drill down a little bit more on it because I want to take the opposing side, those who are so-called protectors of the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, and say that it's not the gun, it's the people. How do we? What do you feel about the whole issue of that Second Amendment argument by those who say, fine, if you have any type of limitation, and even though there's some discussion, apparently there's some so-called agreement that is taking place that may be signed by the president soon on this particular issue. But there are many who feel very strongly that the Second Amendment is being abridged if you make any type of requirements. What say you on that?
First, we need to get educated on that. I would say that the Second Amendment is there. Everyone has the right for a Second Amendment. I'm not saying people cannot own guns, but there should be a vetting process. If you want to bear arms and you go through the right channels, then that is perfectly fine. But there should be a thorough background check that everyone should go through. And it should be medical, it should be criminal record, and it should be anything else that people would need to know in your household. I think everyone in the household should be vetted for a thorough background check when it comes to carrying a gun. That's just my stance on it.
Okay, well, I'm going to move from that topic because I'm sure we could spend the entire time frame we have together in order to talk about that, and I don't want to do that and take away some other thoughts, that ways in which persons can get to better know you. You alluded to the reasons why you were running, and I want you to elaborate a bit. I want to sit there again. I'm sitting there as a voter, and I want to say, why should I vote for Tamisha Civil? Tell the viewing audience and the Stoughton, Avon, and Canton residents why should they vote for you?
Well, they should vote for me because, as stated, our health care is unaffordable. I had emergency. My husband had emergency scare in our household several years ago. When my husband had that medical emergency, we were hurting financially. But luckily, we were able to get back real quick because we have good jobs and we work for the state. But it's important that we support Medicare for all and universal health care and the cost of prescription drugs. We need to put a cap on the cost of prescription drugs because it's affecting everyone. According to the journal, in the American Medical Association, brand name drugs have increased 11% since 2008. This is completely unacceptable because it's affecting a lot of people, and we need to do something about it. I mean, I think we should put people's lives before corporate. The Senate already passed the bill. It's just we're waiting for the House to pass it. But I know if I'm in the State House, I will be passing that bill. So we need to pay attention to putting a cap on prescription drugs, and we need Medicare for all and universal health care, because I've been affected by it. And I know a lot of people right now have been affected by it when it comes to healthcare. We saw it during COVID. People need medical care, pre-existing issues. So these are the things that are very important to me, as well as to those that I've spoken to in the community. I'm a product, I'm going to go to the next one. Education. I'm a product of a public school. I went to one of the best high schools in Massachusetts, which was Dover Sherborne Regional High School. My son is a product of a public school in Stoughton. And public school has really helped me in my career and helping a lot of kids in our district. So school is very important to me. And it's also important for those in the community so that we can provide access to better funding and to help teachers and students to get what they need. And what I'm seeing here is that we need to invest in our school educational system, new buildings. Childcare is pretty expensive. We have a lot of parents leaving the workforce to be with their children. Massachusetts needs to be more affordable in high quality childcare. Our childcare crisis is hurting a lot of parents, as I stated, are taking them out of the workforce. We need to provide funding for care providers for our kids so they can have the opportunity to succeed and have opportunity for parents to go back to the workforce. So universal pre-K is important. And then we have, we have climate change. It's not only impacting our planet, but it's impacting our clean air and water. That's why I'm part of the Stoughton and Canton Sustainable Committee, making it easier for people to install solar panels in their property, encouraging offshore industry. And doing this is not just good for our planet, but it's good and it's creating jobs. And one thing I would say is why people should vote for me is transparency. We have no transparency in our state house. We have one of the least transparent in the state legislature in the country. We need to make committee votes more public. If people are going to vote for me, they're going to see what I'm voting for. They're going to have access to these votes. I signed a transparency pledge bill because people deserve to know. They deserve to know what state reps are voting on. So this is why I am running, and this is why I ask people to vote for me, because these issues are not going anywhere, and it's just, we need to have change. We need to have change so that we can do the work together. And I tell you, you know, the current state representative, this is not personal, he's a great guy. He's a great guy, he's nice. However, he's been in office for 31 years and it's time for change. Healthcare is getting expensive. Climate change is getting worse. Housing is getting unaffordable for many. And we need fresh, new, bold ideas. You know, what makes me different from my opponent is that I support universal health care. He has not co-sponsored Medicare for all. I support putting a cap on the price of prescription drugs. He failed to act on those issues. I support transparency for the State House. He has repeatedly voted no against transparency. So when people say, what is transparency, Tamisha? Transparency is whatever is on that, whatever is at the legislative bill, you need to know what I'm voting on. And if you voted no, I can tell you in front of your face, yeah, I voted for that bill for you. But honestly, you won't know if I have or not, because you can't see, because we don't have transparency. So I think we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be honest with our constituents that transparency is important. Healthcare is getting worse and expensive. Our climate change is impacting our community, and we need to fix it. We need to fix it, and I'm looking to fix the root of the problem that affects the district, which is why I'm running. After speaking to so many people in our community experiencing the same issues like myself, I'm ready to be the voice for the 6th Norfolk District, to lead and to listen to the people that I want to serve to.
Well, thank you for that. I think they have a potpourri of issues that you are passionate about and will bring to the forefront. And I meant to say at the outset, I want to say thank you for allowing me to be on your program recently in Boston. You're a great host as well. So I want to thank you for that. But let me push you on some other issues that you didn't focus upon, but I'm sure they're in the public purview. And I was going to go to the educational issue. In fact, I recently read about what was going on as far as the closing of bathrooms in public schools is an issue that's out there. So I won't dwell on that, because I know you talked about needing to look at the entire educational system from all aspects of it. So I would assume that that's one as well, in terms of the buildings, the people,
Yes.
the resources. I'll give you all of those as points which you would be concerned about. But another one is we see the crumbling of our public transportation system. Most recently, you read about the Orange Line and Red Line are the service is going to be limited as a result of the inability in order both in terms of employees and equipment. Now, that's something too, which the legislature provides funding for the MBTA because their revenue sources are not adequate in order to pay for the entire operation of the MBTA. How would you, as a legislator, address that particular issue as far as our public transportation?
Well, what I would say is that I can tell you that my husband, he works for the MBTA, and I support him and his local union 589. And what I can tell you is that we need to look at the overall picture. We need to make sure that we invest in public transportation, make sure that they're green friendly, make sure that we're providing good service, because I cannot tell you how much the MBTA service, a lot of people are complaining about it. It's always breaking down, it's always delayed. There's something wrong with the infrastructure. We need to invest in the infrastructure and then vote against fare increase. Because one thing that we see all the time is that we're increasing the fare increase, but the trains are not working properly. We need to make sure that our infrastructure are built in a capacity where we're not having issues, and that we can invest in these train systems, we can invest in the transportation system to make it more suitable for people in the community.
Yeah, well, yes, I think those are great points. I've been around for quite a bit and been involved in state government, and I've heard, unfortunately, talk, and it seems even with the more recent, in the past number of years, there was a big announcements by MBTA that they were getting these new cars and it was going to work well, and now we find it had to shelve those because the cars are not working. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, a lot of these issues seem intractable, and that's the reason why folks aren't participating in the voting and political process. What might you do? I think the last election in Stoughton, we had 3% of the eligible voters in Stoughton, and that's only the persons who are registered. That's not even talking about the total population in Stoughton, voted in the last election. What might you do sitting as a legislator? What might you do to encourage people to participate in the electoral process?
Well, what I can tell you is that I love engaging with people. I love talking to people. We need political forums. We need engagements, and we need to get out to the people, whether it's correspondence, sending out correspondence via mail, or just having a forum right now to educate people the importance of voting. One of the things that I don't like is the negative press that Stoughton has been getting. And I think this is an opportunity for everyone to come out, learn about what's happening in your community, and vote for the change that they want to see. I know you touched upon diversity, and Stoughton has changed dramatically throughout the past couple of years. We have a lot of different families coming in, but they don't know what's happening. There's no transparency. No one knows what's happening. No one's talking. We cannot be afraid to acknowledge that we have a problem so that we can fix it by talking to people, finding out what they want. So one of the things that I love to do is get out there, get out and talk to people, find out what their issues are, find out what is it that they would like to see. We need to have more political forums. We need to get out there, whatever the case may be. We need to just get out there to the people and have them engage. People are not engaged because they don't know what's happening. So there's a lot of ways we can reach out to people. But for me, one of them is just getting out there and just meeting people wherever, if it's a community event that I saw you, Joseph, just every different town that the opportunity that I have to get out there to talk to people, we just need to let them know and have everyone to get involved. I mean, if for some reason, I'm not sure why we have less than 3% rate of people voting, but it's not right. You can't fault people for what they don't know, but we have an obligation. We have an obligation to reach out to people in many different ways to have them know that, this is going to be an opportunity that we have to change this September 6th Democratic primary, to reach out to people and to talk to them and let them know what's happening in our community.
Well, we only have a few short moments and I was going to go into another issue, but I'll just state it. But I'm going to state the issue, but I don't even want you to respond. I want you to, in the closing moments, to make your pitch to our
Okay.
viewing audience. I'm starting a campaign because I think our American flag has been hijacked. Because there are many who feel that when you see an American flag, you think it's the Trump flag. And I'll just will leave it there. And I'm asking for many of my folks in the media to help me begin to have that conversation, because there are many that feel that way. And I feel the American flag is my flag, not Trump flag. And I want to be able to deal with that issue. But that may be for another show, or maybe I'll come on your program and we'll talk about it.
Right.
You have about 2 minutes, a minute and a half to make your pitch to the voters. So you're on, Tamisha Civil.
Thank you. 6th District, I'm Tamisha Civil. I'm running for state representative, and I'm asking for your vote. Again, I said running for office is not personal. I have nothing against our current incumbent. Personally, he's a nice guy. However, I believe 31 years, after 31 years, it's time for change. Healthcare is getting expensive. Climate change is getting worse. Housing is getting unaffordable. And we need fresh, new, bold ideas to fix these problems. I'm engaged, I'm invested in the communities, and I'm here to make an impact for everyone on Beacon Hill. So I ask for your vote, September 6th Democratic primary. And if you want to go on my website to learn more about me, go to www.tamishacivil.com. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Tamisha. I wish you well in your campaign. Thank you for coming on Community Forum. And I bid you adieu and wish you well.
Thank you so much.